born out of the fact that Garnacho, although he came from Atletico Madrid, he's an academy graduate, as is Kobbie Mainoo. So this story that came out last week over potentially, if either of them were to move, for example, that would be pure profit on the Manchester United balance sheet if they were then to bring in another player. But he is under contract until 2028. The club say there have been no offers for him either, and Ruben Amorim as well told me, him and Mainoo, he's very impressed with both of them, how they're playing. He did say that Mainoo has room for improvement, and that same thing applies to Garnacho as well. And he spoke a little bit more on the details about where he can play on the pitch, Garnacho, after that Arsenal victory as well. So, yeah, these two players potentially, could go. Garnacho is one that, would bring in a significant fee. And one of the clubs, for example, who are interested would be Napoli. We heard earlier how Kavicha Kvaratskhelia is potentially leaving Italy, and our colleagues at Sky Italia have been reporting that potentially that's a player that they'd be interested in looking at in Garnacho. But he's under contract. Amorim himself is happy with him as well. So as far as he's concerned, he's a Manchester United player and he may not be going anywhere. And in the meantime, they can instead focus on plans on the pitch after that brilliant game against Arsenal in the FA Cup. They've got the bread and butter of the Premier League and a bit of a task at home against Southampton. That's on Thursday. We'll be hearing from Ruben Amorim in this very room this afternoon.
Yeah, lots of good talking points with Amorim. Thank you very much, Sunny. Right, OK, we'll get on to Garnacho in a moment, but let's start with Marcus Rashford. Some interesting developments we've been hearing last night and today, that his representatives have been hawking him around, really, in clubs in Italy, clubs in Spain, and that Barcelona potentially could be his number one target, the number one place that he wants to go to. AC Milan have been considered the front runners, really, over the last few days since news came out that Man United would listen to offers for him. How likely, though, is it that Barcelona could become serious runners in this race to sign Rashford, do you think?
It feels like, Matt, we're going to find out that very kind of question in the next 24 hours. Our colleagues at Sky Italy are saying that today is a very decisive day in Marcus Rashford's future at Manchester United. As you mentioned there, as Sani mentioned as well, his brother, Dwayne Maynard, has been going to different clubs, different teams around Europe to see what interest there is in Marcus Rashford. And you would assume that he wouldn't be doing such a thing without the club's permission to do so. So clearly, Manchester United are aware of this. They obviously want the best solution for Marcus Rashford. Now, when it comes to Barcelona, they've, of course, had this big news story around them over the last few months in terms of registering Dani Olmo and Pau Victor. Now, that is confirmed. That has been confirmed in the last few days. So now the question for them is, well, where would a Marcus Rashford fit in their squad? Well, they've made it very clear they need players to leave Barcelona if they are to sign anyone else this window. So you would look at potential players like Ansu Fati, we saw on loan at Brighton last season, or even other players like Eric Garcia. I think Arnold Araujo had been rumoured with Juventus, but it seems actually Barcelona may look to keep him this window. So you just look at a few of their fringe players they perhaps might look to lose to fit someone like Marcus Rashford, but he would face a lot of competition if he was to go there.
Yeah.
I think that's the big thing, in a sense, of like, where does he fit in within this team? Hansi Flick's spoken about he needs more players for that forward line. They're starting front three, you're probably thinking Yamal, Rafinha, Dani Olmo with Lewandowski. That's a very, very good front four that has performed this season to a high level. The big thing, I think, in terms of that Barcelona team is they're a little bit German. They're quite vertical, they press really high. But Rashford in this system would work really well. A left winger coming inside, Balde on the overlap. Tactically, it would work very well.
Yeah, those are some of the players at AC Milan and Barcelona that are competing with Marcus Rashford for similar positions, really. It's what you guys touched on there. He's, at the moment, looking at two clubs that are quite stacked in those positions. You look at Rafinha and Yamal, who were brilliant the other day for Barcelona against Real Madrid in the Spanish Super Cup in Saudi Arabia. And their numbers are very high. Look at Rafinha there, 64 games, 29 goals. This is since the start of last season, 24 assists. That's a huge amount when you compare to Rashford. Leao as well above that. Pulisic as well. He's played a few more games. And Yamal. So when you look at that, Sam, he's up against some serious competition. If he wants to join one of those two sides, it's not a given, is it, that he's going to be in the starting 11?
No, definitely not. But if they included the season before, then they would have had, Rashford's 30 goal contributions, because that's the type of Rashford that we know. That was from when he was out of form, and everyone expected him to do more because of what he'd done when United won the Carabao Cup. And I think it's something that will be positive for Rashford to have that type of competition, because he's the type of player that thrives under that. He's never necessarily not had that at Manchester United. There's always been players like the Marshalls, the Garnachos that are going to be playing in his position. They've always wondered what best suits him. I think right now it's just more about him finding the love of football again, because when he's playing to that form, he's unstoppable. We've seen it. He's done it in Europe. He's done it for England. He's done it for Manchester United. And I think that it's just better for him to get a situation and a club that wants to play to his strengths and say, you're going to be a part of what we're trying to achieve here.
Let's move this on to Garnacho then, because this is another really interesting story, if, of course, it develops. No formal approaches at the moment, but we are hearing that Napoli would potentially be interested if Khvicha Kvaratskhelia leaves, and he may well find himself at Paris Saint-Germain. It would take a huge bid, we are told, for Manchester United to even consider accepting an offer for Alejandro Garnacho. But it's interesting because if Ruben Amorim does decide to revamp his squad to suit his style of play, then wouldn't you say that Garnacho and probably Kobbie Mainoo would be the two that you could get the most money for?
I think you look at it like that, but at the same time, that's two world-class potential talents. In a sense of Alejandro Garnacho for Manchester United in all competitions, 23 goals, 14 assists already, just 20 years old. You compare that to Cristiano Ronaldo, that is 3 more goal involvements than he had at that same period. The guy has a big level to him. It's similar to Kobbie Mainoo, where you look at the system, there's a number of positions each of those guys could play. Garnacho could even be used as a wing-back at times. I think that's a position that Amorim should toy with in the next few weeks, maybe when Man United are favourites in games. For me, those two players are almost unsellable in that ilk. They need to be the future of Manchester United. And you think about Amad Diallo, Rasmus Højlund, all of a similar age. So that's what I'd do if I were Manchester United, stick.
Yeah. OK, Manchester City don't want to stick. They want to be active, don't they, in this window? And Sky Germany are reporting that Manchester City and Eintracht Frankfurt are not far away from a deal for Omar Marmoush. City's current offer is believed to be slightly lower than Eintracht's £67.5 million demand, and it's in the range of about £59 million plus add-ons. We're hearing also, Dan, that it's unlikely that he will play against Dortmund on Friday for Frankfurt. He did play in their last game, scored a goal and a couple of assists, but we're hearing it's unlikely he'll play on Friday. Is this getting very close now?
Absolutely, and I think if you're a Manchester City fan hearing that, you're starting to get excited that there could be a conclusion to this deal. Now, we saw Marmoush last night, a few more goal involvements to add on to what has been a very impressive season for him. And I think Marmoush will give this Manchester City side, if it is to be confirmed this week, just a lot of excitement, because I think when you looked at Manchester City last night against Brentford, at times it did look a little stale. They didn't have particularly a lot of options off the bench. Savio did look good in spurts. Foden, of course, scored 2 goals. But outside of that, outside of James McAtee, really on the bench, you didn't have anyone else. And Marmoush, you would imagine, could make an immediate impact.
Yeah, it's the quality, it's the finishing, it's the assisting. You know, there's 2 players in European football or Europe's top 5 leagues this season that are over 30 goal involvements. Mohamed Salah, Omar Marmoush, 2 Egyptian players. Really cool to see. But in terms of that, I completely agree. It's that pace from deep. It's that ability to play all across the forward line and really provide quality left wing, right wing, in attacking midfield. It will be an asset for Manchester City. And we all think about Julian Alvarez, player that really went under the radar for City. Now we look back and think massive part of that team.
Definitely. Yeah. They missed that type of player. I think I don't know if it was underrated, because we did speak about, what he was doing when he stepped in for Haaland when he was injured, the type of positions that he picked up, played on the left, played down the middle, played up top as well. But when he left, they never really replaced him. I think they probably thought, Savinho would hit the ground running like he did at Girona. Doku would kick on, Foden would carry on his season from last year. But like we said in the earlier show, when you're competing at that level, it's hard to maintain that throughout the season. And I think, Marmoush coming in will give them a new sense of life.
It's a good point there, because Man City actually made the highest net profit in the summer of any Premier League club. So is this what we're seeing in this January? It's completely different from what they normally do in January. They're going all in here. They're making their moves quickly. They are spending big. Is this a reaction, do you think, to that summer where they were quite inactive. And as Sam says, they didn't replace a big player.
I think so, yeah. I think there's a lot of talk after the Champions League win of being difficult to not only sign players on contracts that performed very well in that season, but also keep players that hadn't played enough. That was a difficult season from a contract perspective. So maybe they're still feeling that lag in that sense of they haven't quite got to the point of where they should be. We all know City needed another defensive midfielder. They need options in attack, obviously losing Julian Alvarez. This is the time, but defensively they've been very poor. 29 goals conceded so far this season. Last season, 34. That's big issues that they need to solve.
I would just say as well, you mentioned Julian Alvarez and missing him. I actually would argue as well, they never really replaced Riyad Mahrez. And what I talk about Riyad Mahrez is not just someone who can play on the right wing, but you talk about underrated. I think Riyad Mahrez was someone in that Manchester City team. How many countless times in the Champions League, in the Premier League, he would just pop up with a goal. And it would quite often be a game-winning goal. And I think that's something Marmoush could potentially add by just scoring something out of nothing. And as you mentioned about the window there, I do think it's underrated just what we're talking about Manchester City in this window. It's very rare we see Manchester City potentially, if all of these deals go through, spend north of £120 million in a January transfer window. They've not spent that in the last decade in January. So I think that just gives you a bit of context as to what we're talking about here.
Yeah, Marmoush is sounding like it's getting closer. Abdulkadir Husanov and Vitor Hayes, the two centre-backs as well, maybe on the verge of sorting those two out as well. But how about outgoings? Kyle Walker was left out of the Man City squad to play Brentford after asking to leave. The England defender will only leave City, though, if he can secure a move to an elite club that will further his England prospects. This is what Pep said last night about Walker.
Pep, obviously that's 2 games in a row now where Kyle Walker hasn't been involved. Do you think it's likely he's played his last game for the club?
I said what I said. I don't have anything more to say.
And in terms of the 3 potential incomings, Kusanov?
Nothing to say.
He wasn't giving us much there, was he, Pep? But Walker was left out of the squad entirely. AC Milan, it's been reported, are interested, but they may have to choose between Marcus Rashford and Kyle Walker because of the situation in Italy in terms of signing non-EU players. Other Italian clubs might be in a similar position as well. Do you expect other big European clubs to come in for Kyle Walker, even though he's going to turn 35 in May?
Yeah, for sure. I think he just wants a new challenge. You know, we spoke about it in the summer about the links with Bayern. He was very close to leaving. You know, they were very honest about that. The video that they done when he said, "I'm staying," like that was iconic. But I think, you know, when you're performing at such a high level consistently that City have done in the last few years, and he's been at the heart of that for City and England, sometimes you need a different environment to, you know, maybe that's not as demanding. You know, AC Milan are definitely going to be a team that want to compete for the titles. But it's just not the same that we see from Pep Guardiola's City. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. You know, he's still at an age where he can still perform. We've seen with Thiago Silva. There's a lot of players that still perform into their late 30s. So maybe he just needs a new challenge.
Yep. OK, well, he wants one. That is what we're hearing. Kyle Walker wants to leave Manchester City. Will that happen? We'll have to wait and find out. Still to come, though, we'll be discussing Arsenal. Massive game tonight, isn't it? Small matter of the North London derby. Will they sign a striker before the window closes? We'll chat through their options. Stay with us.
way and the injuries, like you mentioned, it makes sense for a player that can come in and have an immediate impact.
Can I ask you, Sam, though? So we've seen him really start every game for Palace since, I think, mid-October or so. So as you mentioned, he's playing consistently. He's also playing three at the back at Palace. So how do you think he's going to adapt? Enzo Maresca playing with a four. Like, do you think he is good enough on the ball? Because even at Chelsea, we've seen him play a three at the back mostly.
I think he's quite versatile. I think he's one of those players that can play quite a few systems at Chelsea. He's done it under Thomas Tuchel as well. It's going to be interesting to see how he adapts and how soon he adapts, because obviously Tosin is there, Joshua Chimpong are also centre-backs, but like we've seen, there's the FA Cup, there's the Conference League, there's the Premier League as well. Chelsea have been rotating, but with the injuries, they want ready-made quality to be able to fill in those positions, and I think he can do that, definitely.
Dan, does this mean that a big money move for Mark Gay is quite unlikely?
Well, Steve Parish said in the summit it would take superstar money to get Mark Gay, and I think what you're probably finding in this window, I think with all top clubs really, other than Manchester City, who didn't perhaps spend that much last summer, is they are having to still consider PSR. And I think for Chelsea, it makes a lot of sense. That's why they loaned Trevor Chalobah out, to get more experience, to play consistently. And now they have a ready-made player, as you mentioned, to walk into the side, compared to spending north of 60, 70 million pounds on Mark Gay, which actually they'll still be hoping Wesley Fofana can come back at some point, whether it's this season or next season, hopefully get his injuries past him. So they do have Wesley Fofana, let's not forget him, as well as Benoit Badiashile as well, who they're still hoping he grows into that role in this Maresca side as well. So let's not forget, Chelsea do have centre-backs, they're just not quite fit at the moment.
Just one more line from Chelsea, Sam, I want to get your thoughts on, because Chelsea have contacted Bayern Munich to ask about the availability of Matisse Tell. Bayern have an interest in signing Christopher Nkunku, but no swap deal has been discussed or offered by Chelsea. Forget the swap, but in terms of Matisse Tell, is that a signing that could excite the Chelsea fans? Do you think he would improve Chelsea going forward?
Yeah, for sure. I've seen so many different photoshops of him in Chelsea kits online because he's a quality player. And last season he was really good. He had 10 goals, 6 assists. He was playing as an understudy to Harry Kane. And I feel like this season we expected him to kick on, but he's only played 351 minutes in the league. He's not really been able to get the opportunities that he would have hoped for. But he said in the summer that he wants to be a success at Bayern. They gave him the opportunity. He can play on the left. He can play down the middle. Exactly the profile that Chelsea needs. So I'm not sure whether there will be some form of swap deal, but I know Bayern Munich know the value that he has on this market. You don't get those type of strikers everywhere. So it'll be interesting to see if Chelsea can almost come up with a deal for Nkunku, who's also wanting more minutes, to go back to Bayern and, see if Tell can come to Stamford Bridge.
I think he's an exciting player, isn't he? He can play anywhere. He's so explosive, both feet, can dribble, can shoot, can create, get shots away. It's kind of one of those players where you don't quite know where he'll play eventually. Probably centre forward, if he gets that education of, Robin van Persie would play left, would play right, would play centre forward, play behind the striker. That put him to that point where he's very complete. You look at the moment, Mathias Tell's numbers are probably best from the right wing. That's where he gets his most goal involvements. Saying that, though, could play all across the front line. It's just another option for Chelsea if that deal were to go through.
I wonder what kind of a team could do with a player like that. Oh, yeah, Arsenal. OK, we're going to talk about Arsenal now and the fact that they are looking at the possibility of signing a forward this month. Of course, you've got the double whammy at the moment with Gabriel Jesus, Cruciate, he's out for the season. Kai Havertz, not in good form at the moment. So they're going to look, I would presume, at someone who has the option of playing through the middle, if not an out-and-out centre forward. Come on, Dave, give the Arsenal fans some hope. Give us some realistic options that Arsenal could sign in January.
I think that is the big thing, because if you just said not January, Victor Gyökeres is number one by a mile. 62 goals in 2024, playing the football of his career. So good. But saying that, we've got to look at other options. I think for me, number one would be Benjamin Sesko. He's someone that's got that quality, got the physicality, the speed to play in the Premier League, but also he's got that ability to create something out of nothing, finishes with power. And you look at his performances, he really kicked on at the start of 2024. From that point to now, 18 goals in the Bundesliga, comparable to, the likes of Matheus Cunha in the Premier League or Kai Havertz, scored more goals in league football. Big potential. would work in Arsenal's kind of dominant, physically built system out there as a number 9.
Yeah, I mean, Arsenal did want him, I think, in the summer, and for whatever reason he stayed at Leipzig. But what did you want to add to that?
I just wanted to say, though, we're talking about all of these names like Gyökeres or Sesko or even Vlahovic. Could they reignite their interest in him? But what do you all think Arsenal actually need in a 9? I mean, it's something we haven't really talked about, but easier said than done, though, isn't it? But what in Mikel Arteta's system do they need from their 9, as well as goals?
It's weird because I feel like Havertz is... Obviously, we can say he's out of form. The last few games, he's missed some chances that we could say he could do better in. But he scored quite a few goals for Arsenal this season.
It's only he's had 2 very bad games.
Exactly.
But in general,
I think he's got 7 goals in the Premier League. But when you look at the players around him, you know, Jesus before his injury, he had 3 goals. Sterling hasn't had any goals in the league. Trossard's only got 3 goals. Martinelli 5. And I feel like the wide players around him could be contributing to it more. Similar to how Chelsea are looking. You know, you say Jackson is missing chances, but the players around him aren't contributing as much as, you know, the managers would want them to. So when we're looking at the market and the type of strikers that are available, yes, they're all scoring, but they're not coming in January. So it's like, what can we do to almost appease that? And what wide men can, you know, maybe be versatile enough to be able to play out wide, that can play down the middle as well?
Is it possible, though, that Arsenal could say, OK, well, we can't get what we want in January, so we'll just wait until the summer and we'll go all in for Isak?
I think that's definitely a possibility, and obviously we look at Isak, the goals he scored in 2024, 25 for Newcastle. Then you look at what he does around that. He creates, he dribbles, he shoots, he's got a lot of quality, and that potentially would be the idea, that they've got this player that they can bounce off, that they can play to, that can pull wide and other players can move in. Then you also look at Martin Ødegaard and Declan Rice in terms of their goals. We've got to forget, like, you know, what was it, 2 seasons ago, Martin Ødegaard, 15 non-penalty goals, the joint best ever in Premier League history.
Yeah.
Getting more goals out of him would require a forward that is comfortable receiving into feet. That's something that Isak has got in abundance. The quality he has on the ball would shine through, but similar to a Victor Gyökeres. And I think that's the idea, that Arsenal would need a striker, comfortable in possession, can press. You basically need a very complete forward. If we're all honest, it's a very, very complete player, because that is where Arsenal are right now. They're competing for the Premier League title.
Let's move this on to Zubimendi then. Let's get a line on him, because it does sound like Arsenal have stolen a march on those who want to sign Martin Zubimendi, and it could well happen in the summer. Liverpool desperately wanted this player last summer. Is this going to be a bit of a coup for Arsenal? Is it what they need? I mean, I know all the fans want a forward, but will he improve Arsenal in that position?
Yeah, I mean, we all spoke incredibly highly of him in the summer. We saw him play England in the Euros final. He came off the bench on that occasion. And as you also say, Matt, Liverpool thought they were very close to getting that deal over the line. They activated his release clause, which is just over £50 million, but he ended up changing his mind. But it seems that Arsenal have come to a compromise with Real Sociedad to say, look, we would love him this month, but if it means we're front of the queue, why don't we negotiate something for next summer? And it is good succession planning, really, because when you think that the likes of Jorginho, Thomas Partey are both out of contract in the summer, both also north of 30 as well. Of course, there's always space for more experienced midfielders, but I think really Declan Rice is anchoring that midfield so well. Put Zubimendi next to him, you now have 2 excellent ball-playing midfielders. And I think, as you mentioned, Dave, I think it really is just now. I think Mikel Arteta has obviously adapted this Arsenal side from being very creative, very open, to trying to solidify what they are defensively. But I just wonder maybe if he thinks they've gone too rigid, and actually adding a bit more of a flow in that midfield, a bit more creativity, might just help unlock those numbers in the attacking players.
OK, well, Zubimendi might well be through the door for Arsenal in the summer, but right now they really could do with a striker. That could be one of the stories that really rolls on during this January window. Right, coming up, we will head to sunny Rio de Janeiro and hear from South American football expert Tim Vickery. He'll have an update on all sorts of players from that part of the world, including Manchester City target Vitor Hayes. Stay with us.
They're a pragmatically run club, and the bid kept on going up and up and up. And it seems to have reached 35 million euros, which is the Palmeiras asking price. So it looks like this is going to go ahead in the next few days, which will make him, Vitor Reis, the most expensive centre-back to have come out of Brazil. And this clearly, I think, is City pushing the reboot button. Perhaps a reaction to Guardiola's confession that he made a mistake by not reinforcing the squad during the summer. What have they seen? I think they've seen three things that they really like about this player. And you can clearly see the influence of Marquinhos and Thiago Silva in his play. That's the kind of centre-back that he wants to be. He's classy on the ball, head up. He can play out the back. He's also versatile defensively. He can operate in a back three or a back four. Happier right side, but he's played left side. And the other thing that he's got, which seems to be a natural thing, is leadership qualities. So those are, I think, the things that City have identified, which mean that they want to bring him to the Premier League now.
You did say last week, Tim, that you think he might need filling out physically.
Yeah.
Does that suggest that you don't think he's quite ready for Premier League just yet?
I would be surprised, and I think there's an interesting comparison here with Murillo at Forest. And Vitor Reis is coming on 22 games. Murillo was a little bit similar. I think it was 25 games at Corinthians and into the Premier League for him. But there are some important differences. Murillo is just that little bit older. Vitor Reis turned 19 this week. Murillo is also, obviously, he's built, isn't he? He hasn't got any physical problems whatsoever. I do think Vitor Reis needs a little bit of filling out. I think he can be bullied. But the other one is the adaptation in the style of play. And Murillo, obviously, is outstanding in a side that with a low block and a counter-attack. Very, very different from the way that centre-backs at Man City have to play. They high line, they're exposed. Now, Vitor Reis has been playing for a coach, very interesting coach with Palmeiras, Portuguese, Abel Ferreira, who's got a touch of the Jose Mourinho's about him. He's now going to a very, very different world at Man City to play under Guardiola. So that adapting to playing higher up the field, where the centre-back is much, much more exposed, that, I think, means that it's hard to imagine him making an immediate impact. And I think probably the reason that City wanted him now is to get him over and work on him, develop him. And it could well be that the Club World Cup will be very important for him, developing him, playing for Man City rather than Palmeiras.
Tim, what about Arsenal? Jorginho has been linked with a move to Flamengo.
Again, Club World Cup. Just as Palmeiras are very, very keen on taking Andreas Pereira from Fulham, and they're willing to play poker on this one. They're willing to take this to the end of the window. Flamengo very interested in taking back Jorginho, who's obviously Brazilian, but a type of midfielder who, when he emerged, really wasn't appreciated in Brazilian football at all, and made his career, obviously, in Italy before moving to the Premier League. But someone who can dictate the rhythm of the play from deep for Flamengo. So that this is, again, the importance and the influence of the Club World Cup on this January transfer window.
Tim, Diego Leon looks set to join Manchester United. What can the United fans expect to see from him in the summer?
Yeah, he can't move until the summer because he's still only 17. And this really is an example of how quick the process can move these days, because he made his debut in Paraguay for Cerro Porteño in August. By October, he's already been linked with big Premier League clubs, and first Arsenal, and now it's Manchester United. Strapping lad, left back, can go wide and cross, can attack the space in the penalty area, can defend. Did score one of the all-time great own goals last season for his club, so he won't want that to be bouncing around YouTube very much. But he looks very interesting. But there's a lot of development still to do there, and he's got an interesting few months ahead. Next week he should be playing for Paraguay in the South American under-20s, which is an important conveyor belt for talent. Then his club are in the qualifying rounds of the Champions League over here, the Libertadores. So I suspect come the summer, he'll be a much more rounded product than he is at the moment.
Tim, Alejandro Garnacho is being linked with a move potentially away from Old Trafford. Now, he's been in and out of Ruben Amorim's side since his arrival. Does he need to leave to kind of enhance, improve his international standing with Argentina?
Well, I think a lot of people in Argentina will be hoping that he moves. Remember, Argentina have just lost Angel Di Maria. Now, how on earth do you replace Di Maria, who retired from international football after the Copa America? And Garnacho is the one that they're looking to be that one who can do one-against-one situations, who can combine with Messi. So there's a worry in Argentina that he seems to have stalled a little bit. Garnacho is in fact much more Spanish than he is Argentine. He was born there, he grew up there, and so maybe a move back to Spain would be important from an Argentine point of view to get his career back on course.
Now, Tim, you mentioned Murillo, the tank, as he's known quite a lot at Nottingham Forest. The fans are hoping he signs a new contract very soon. But do you think he's surpassed any expectations since his arrival? Because he has been outstanding this season.
Yeah, I mean, 25 games for Corinthians and then into the Premier League. Defending is a collective endeavour as well. You know, you've got to be able to be on the same page as your teammates. And he came over not really speaking the language. So I think he's surpassed all expectations. And now he's fighting for a place in the Brazil side. He's got to get ahead of Gabriel Magalhães of Arsenal as the left-sided centre-back. But he's been an absolute sensation. And I think Forest fans are aware that even if they get a new contract on him, they're not going to be able to keep him forever. He's going places. Very, very impressive centre-back indeed.
Yeah, he really is. I mean, he's come here and hit the ground running. But in terms of players, Tim, who could come here, who we haven't discussed from South America, are there any other names that you would chuck out to us of players that clubs really should be looking at as options in January?
Well, there are two that I think could happen. One is a centre-forward called Igor Jesus, with Botafogo, who won the Brazilian Championship, won the Libertadores, South America's Champions League. Now, this is an amazing story because a year ago, Igor Jesus is playing in the Arab Emirates and he's not even a household name in his own home. But Botafogo, their scouting network is so good. They picked up on him. They waited until he was out of contract. They brought him back to Brazil. He made his debut for Botafogo in July. And by October, he's Brazil's first choice centre forward. Now, the owner of Botafogo is John Textor, who also has a stake in Crystal Palace. And Textor is saying that Igor Jesus will move to the Premier League in this window. And Textor is also describing Igor Jesus as the perfect centre forward, and he really has a lot of attributes. So he's strong, he's mobile, and he really bullied the Vitor Reis about to join Man City, really bullied him this year. He can combine, he can score in the air, he can score off either foot, he can put in a defensive shift as well. He's a very, very impressive centre forward, Igor Jesus. Now, he has been linked to West Ham and Ipswich and Brentford, but I've just been listening to you fine gentlemen, your discussion of Arsenal at centre forward, and I tell you this, the Arsenal could do a lot worse than have a look at Igor Jesus. Another one is his Botafogo teammate, Luis Henrique, who is very strong, powerful and skillful right winger, left-footed right winger, cutting in. He was chosen as the best player of the Americas in 2024. Now, the idea was that he was going to be joining Lyon, which also is owned by John Textor. But there's a problem there that they may not be able to register him with the financial fair play restrictions in France. Now, there are bids in from Fiorentina, and there are also apparently bids in from Premier League clubs. And you could really imagine why they would want him. I mean, he's really impressive, Luis Henrique. In full flight, he's a terrifying prospect. But there is a catch. And the catch is that before coming back to Brazil a year ago, he was at Betis in Spain. And he is involved in the alleged match-fixing scandal, which hovers so ominously over the career of Lucas Paquetá. It's exactly the same situation. Now, after a long delay, the Spanish authorities are now investigating him. Does that mean that clubs will be reluctant to? Obviously, at this stage, everyone is innocent. No one has been proved guilty of anything. But does that mean that clubs will be reluctant to shell out big time for a player who could have complications down the line? But certainly on the field, Luis Enrique, very impressive. And Igor Jesus, the one I mentioned before, I'll be very surprised if he's not in the Premier League by the end of January.
Great stuff. Fabulous and very informative as usual, Tim. And you know what? I do hope the weather picks up for you, mate. You can't be in Rio without the sun, so I hope that sorts itself out.
We live in.
I would love to be there right now, really would. Number one. Right, coming up, we will talk about Leicester, West Ham and Ipswich. Could they be close to announcing new signings? Stay with us.
term solution, you know, bridging the gap between the West Ham we have now and then Potter's version of West Ham in the long term. When we're looking at that forward line that played yesterday, you know, looking at Souček, looking at Paquetá, that did really well, and you can't look away from that. Fulham are one of the best teams in the Premier League this season in terms of how they play out the back, they press really well. It was a great performance from West Ham United, catching Fulham in those situations. So you also look at that as well, you know, the impact off the bench of Danny Ings as well. How does it all fit together? And that's obviously the challenge that Graham Potter's going to have to deal with.
Just from Nottingham Forest point of view, quickly, Dan, we were hearing they want a replacement. So if talks have started, does that suggest that Forest do have an option?
Potentially, but I also think it's important to say that they don't want to sell Taiwo Awoniyi. They don't have any intention to. And sometimes a player doesn't always need to make a transfer. I mean, I'll be devil's advocate. I think Awoniyi hasn't played much this season. Yes, he's had 2 major groin injuries in the last 2 seasons. But this Nottingham Forest side will need to rotate in the second half of the season. Chris Wood will need to come out at some point in the second half of the season. So he will get his opportunities. And if you're Awoniyi, why would you want to leave the second place team in the Premier League? From a player's perspective, I'm sure he's very happy there. There's a great atmosphere at Nottingham Forest. Like I said, sometimes players don't need to leave.
Right, let's move this on to Leicester then, because Leicester have recalled Tom Cannon from his loan spell at Stoke. What does this mean? What might Leicester's plans for Tom Cannon be? Is he a possibility for the starting 11?
My kind of feeling is maybe not, only because I think Leicester in this window will be looking to recoup as much money as they can to help rebuild Ruud van Nistelrooy's side. Tom Cannon is attracting a lot of interest in the Championship. I think Sheffield United are long-term admirers of him. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is a very short return to Seagrave, a short return to Leicester, as Leicester maybe look to ship him out and get some money back.
And what's the latest on Woyo Koulibaly, right back who can play left back, who we're hearing is quite close? Yeah,
some much needed reinforcements in that area of the pitch, especially to give James Justin a bit of relief right back. We understand Koulibaly. An agreement in principle is pretty much there for him, but I think Leicester just working on the final details to get that deal over the line.
And they should have a ready-made song for him. You know, Buffalo Soldier. Whoa, yo, yo. It's terrible. I don't know why. It's just something different. I hope he's not watching. Right, let's talk about Ipswich quickly before we go, Sam. Jadon Philogene is close. We are hearing Donyell Marlin was announced already going to Aston Villa. Emery said it's going to be 1 in, 1 out. What would Philogene offer Ipswich?
I think depth. I think when you see Amari Hutchinson out injured for the next few weeks, they needed a few forwards that can contribute to goals. You know, they're heavily reliant on Liam Delap at the moment. Smodics has contributed as well, but I think they just need a few more cogs that can help them really, you know, take the challenge of staying in the league. They've been linked with Ben Doak. In the summer, they were linked to Latte Lath as well, but that kind of went quiet. But I think those type of players would suit what McKenna's doing there.
Dave, do you reckon they've got enough to stay up as it is, or do they need thickening out a bit more, and in what positions?
I think thickening out is a big thing. I think Wes Burns hasn't had the same impact as he had in the Championship. Philogene's going to come in and be that spark. And look at his numbers, 12 goals and 6 assists at Hull City. It was a great display there, but also defensively very, very spot on, ranked in the top 3% of wingers in the division for tackles won. So he's going to give you a lot that Wes Burns gave Ipswich last season.
As ever, guys, been an absolute pleasure to spend a couple of hours with you this morning and afternoon. Thank you very much. We'll be back with Good Morning Transfers tomorrow, 9 a.m. And if you can't watch that, don't worry, there is Transfer Talk as usual. Same time, same place, midday. And later today, it's the Transfer Show, 5 p.m, 7 p.m, Dharmesh Sheth and Tim Thornton in for that one. Coming up, though, it is Lunchtime Live. We're going to hear from Manchester United head coach Ruben Amorim live. Stay tuned for that.